My millionaire husband left everything to me, nothing to our daughter. She and her husband called me a simple housewife and sued for forgery until the judge recognized me. Is that really you? I stand in the courtroom hallway, looking at the oak doors of the courtroom, and I hear my 30-year-old daughter, Caitlin, laughing behind them, laughing at me, at her poor, uneducated mother, who stole her late father's inheritance. She doesn't know that. 25 years ago, my name was printed in every legal publication on the East Coast. She doesn't know that Judge Robert McKenzie, who is presiding over this case, was once my junior clerk. But I do, and now I want to laugh too, but instead I just clench my bag and open the door. The courtroom is small, smelling of old wood and paper dust. Caitlin is sitting at a table with her lawyer, a slick 35-year-old named Derek Holloway, who looks like he just graduated from law school and is very proud of his burgundy tie. Next to Caitlin sits her husband, Travis, a car dealership manager with a broad smile and cheap shoes. He whispers something to his daughter, and she giggles, covering her mouth with her hand. They both look at me as if I am some pathetic old woman who is about to get what she deserves. I sit down at my table. I didn't bring a lawyer. Why would I? I know this game better than anyone in this room. Holloway notices that I'm alone, and his smile widens. He leans over to Caitlin and says something that makes her nod in satisfaction. I'm 54 years old. My gray hair is pulled back in a ponytail, and I'm wearing no makeup. I'm wearing a simple gray dress that I bought at a discount store 10 years ago. I look like a typical housewife who spends her life cleaning and cooking. That's how Caitlin sees me. That's how she's always seen me. The door behind the judge opens, and Robert McKenzie enters the courtroom. He has aged, gray hair, wrinkles around his eyes, but his gait is still the same, confident. He sits down, opens a folder of documents, and begins to read. I see his gaze skim across the lines, then pause. He looks up and sees me. His face turns pale, really pale, as if he has seen a ghost. "Ashley Creswell?" he asks quietly. "Is that really you?" "Yes, Your Honor," I reply calmly. "It's me." The room falls silent. Caitlin stops laughing. Holloway stares at me, then at the judge. Travis frowns, not understanding what is happening. "I heard that you—" Mackenzie pauses, then clears his throat. "I heard that you left the practice." "Yes," I nod, 25 years ago. He stares at me for a few more seconds, then returns to his papers. But his hands are shaking slightly. I can see it, and I know he remembers. He remembers how I won the case where he was my intern. He remembers how I demolished the opposing side's arguments in 20 minutes. He remembers that I never lost. Caitlin leans over to Holloway and whispers something sharply. He shrugs, but his confidence is no longer as strong. "Case number 4872, Judge McKenzie announces. Caitlin Dutry versus Ashley Creswell. Appeal of Marcus Dutry's will." Holloway stands up, straightens his shoulders, and begins his speech. He talks about how I manipulated my late husband, how I used his illness to force him to rewrite his will in my favor. He talks about how Marcus always loved his daughter, how he wanted to leave her everything, but I got in the way. He talks about how I am a simple housewife with no education, no career, no merits, and that the only way I could have obtained such property is through deception. I sit and listen. I don't interrupt, I don't argue, I just listen. Caitlin looks at me with triumph in her eyes. She thinks she has won. She thinks that now the judge will rule in her favor and I will be left with nothing. Marcus died 6 months ago. Pancreatic cancer. Fast and brutal. He spent the last 3 months at home because he didn't want to be in the hospital. I took care of him. Caitlin came every 2 weeks, stayed for an hour, then left. She couldn't watch her father die. But Nina, my 16-year-old daughter, sat with him for hours, reading aloud to him, holding his hand. She wasn't afraid of death. She was afraid of losing her father, but she wasn't afraid to be there. A week before his death, Marcus called a notary. He rewrote his will. He left me everything: the house, the business, the accounts. Caitlin received a symbolic dollar and a note. My daughter must learn to appreciate what is earned with her own hands. He left her a trust fund for her education, $150,000, which she could use when she went to college. Caitlin didn't believe it. She came to me a week after the funeral and screamed that I had set it all up, that I had brainwashed her father, that I had ruined her life. Travis stood behind her and nodded, supporting her every word, and then they filed a lawsuit. Holloway finishes his speech and sits down. Judge Mackenzie looks at me. "Mrs. Creswell, do you have anything to say?" I stand up. I take a folder of documents out of my bag and place it on the table. "Your Honor, the will was drawn up in the presence of 2 witnesses and a notary. The medical records of the late Marcus Daughtry confirm that at the time the will was drawn up, he was fully competent. A psychiatric evaluation obtained 2 days before the will was drawn up also confirms his sound mind." Holloway stands up. "Your Honor, these documents could be forged." Judge Mackenzie gives him a cold stare. "Mr. Holloway, are you accusing the notary and the doctors of forging documents?" Holloway turns pale. "No, Your Honor, but..." "Then sit down." I look at Caitlin. She presses her lips together, her face red with anger. Travis whispers something in her ear, and she nods sharply. Judge Mackenzie puts the documents aside and looks at me again. "Mrs. Creswell, I have a question. Why hasn't your name been in legal circles for the last 25 years? "Because I left the practice to raise my daughter." He nods slowly. "You were one of the best corporate lawyers I knew. Why did you leave?" "Because my family was more important than my career." Caitlin stands up abruptly. "That's a lie. You never valued family. You were always cold and indifferent. You..." "Mrs. Daughtry, sit down." The judge interrupts her, but she doesn't sit down. She looks at me with hatred. "You ruined my life. You took everything that belonged to me, and now you're pretending to be the victim." I don't answer. I just look at her, and suddenly I see not hatred in her eyes, but pain. Deep old pain that she has hidden for years. She thinks I don't love her. She thinks I never loved her. Judge Mackenzie announces a recess. Caitlin storms out of the courtroom, slamming the door behind her. Travis runs after her. Holloway gathers his papers, his hands shaking. I remain seated. I take out my phone and text Nina, "Everything's fine, don't worry." She replies instantly, "Mom, what if she wins?" I look at the message and don't know how to respond. Because Caitlin can't win this case, but she has already lost something much more important. The second hearing is scheduled for a week later. During this time, I reread all the documents 3 times, even though I knew there were no mistakes in them. The will was flawlessly drafted. Marcus signed it in the presence of a notary and 2 witnesses, our neighbor, retired Carl Westbrook, and family doctor, Dr. Elliot Chen. Both gave written testimony that Marcus was of sound mind, understood what he was doing, and was not under duress. Holloway didn't stand a chance. I saw it during the first hearing when he tried to prove that the medical records were incomplete. He didn't know the rules of procedure, got confused about dates, and his motions were so sloppily drafted that Judge Mackenzie didn't even hide his irritation. But Caitlin didn't see that. Or didn't want to see it. At the second hearing, Holloway tried to call a witness, some Glenda Morrison who supposedly had been caring for Marcus for the last few months. "I didn't know any Glenda Morrison. Marcus died at home. I took care of him myself. Sometimes Nina helped. There was no outside caregiver." Judge Mackenzie asked for documents confirming that this woman had indeed worked in our home. Holloway hastily began searching through his files, but found nothing. Then the judge asked for Glenda Morrison's address. Holloway gave an address that turned out to be a demolished house in a neighboring county. "Mr. Holloway," the judge said coldly, "if you try to present a false witness to the court again, I will consider revoking your license." Caitlin turned pale. Travis quickly whispered something to Holloway. who waved his hand, and the hearing was over. The motion was denied. The case was to be closed at the next hearing in 2 weeks. I returned home and found Nina in the kitchen. She was sitting at the table staring at her phone, her face red from crying. "What happened?" I asked. She looked up and wiped her nose with her sleeve. "Caitlin called. She said you're ruining her life. The dad would never have left her anything if it weren't for you." I sat down across from her. "Nina, your father made that decision himself. I didn't interfere." "Why did he do that?" she asked quietly. "Why did he leave her only $1? "Because he wanted her to understand something important." "What exactly?" I didn't answer. I didn't know how to explain. Marcus had told me a week before he died, "Caitlin thinks money is the only thing that matters. She's never worked for anything more. I want her to learn." But it sounded cruel, and I wasn't sure Caitlin would ever understand. The next morning, Nina came to me while I was making breakfast. "Mom, there's a man outside our house. He was taking pictures." I went to the window. A man in his mid-40s was standing by the fence wearing jeans and a dark jacket with a camera. He was taking pictures of our house, then writing something down in a notebook. "Who is he?" Nina asked. "A private investigator," I replied calmly. "Did Caitlin hire him?" I nodded. Nina clenched her fists. "That's not right. She has no right. She does. It's legal. But he's spying on us." "He's doing his job." Nina went out onto the porch. I could see through the window how she approached the man and said something to him. He smiled, replied. She waved her hand and returned to the house. "What did you say to him?" I asked. "That he was wasting his time, that you hadn't done anything wrong." The man stayed near our house for 3 more days. Then he disappeared. But a week later, Nina said she saw him near the school talking to our neighbor, Mrs. Talbot. She was an old woman who always knew everything about everyone in the neighborhood. "Mom, what if they find something bad?" Nina asked that evening. We were sitting in the kitchen. I was cutting vegetables for a salad. She was doing her homework. "There's nothing bad," I replied. "But you were a lawyer. You defended big companies." "Maybe someone got offended?" "Maybe." She looked at me, waiting for me to continue, but I didn't say anything else. There were things I didn't want to talk about, cases I had handled 25 years ago, people who had lost because of me. It was in the past, and I tried not to think about it. But Caitlin was thinking about it. Caitlin was searching. That evening, she called Nina. I could hear Nina talking in her room, her voice rising and falling. Then the door opened, and she came out, her face wet with tears. "Caitlin says you manipulated Dad, that you were always cold, that you made him rewrite his will." "That's not true," I said quietly. "How am I supposed to know?" Nina exclaimed. "How am I supposed to know what's true and what's not? You never tell me anything." "Why did you quit your job? Why did you hide who you were? Why did Dad leave Caitlin nothing?" I didn't know how to respond. The words stuck in my throat. "Maybe Caitlin is right," Nina continued. "Maybe you really only wanted the money. Maybe you never loved us." "Nina, why did you quit your job in the first place?" she exclaimed. "If you were so successful, why did you give it all up?" "Because I wanted to be with you." "That's not an answer." She ran to her room and slammed the door. I stood in the kitchen and looked at the empty hallway. My hands were shaking. I left law when Caitlin was 5. Before that, I worked 16 hours a day, traveled on business, missed birthdays and holidays. Marcus tried to support me, but I saw Caitlin growing up without me, how she stopped asking when I would be back, how she was getting used to me not being there. One day, I came home from another court hearing and found Caitlin on the living room floor. She was drawing something with pencils. I walked closer and saw the drawing, our family, Marcus, Caitlin, and an empty space where I should have been. "Why didn't you draw Mom?" I asked. Caitlin looked at me in surprise. "You don't live here." The next day, I wrote my resignation letter, but Caitlin didn't remember that, or didn't want to remember. To her, I was always just a mom who stayed at home, cooked, cleaned, and had no life of her own. She didn't know that I had given up my career for her. She didn't know that it was the hardest decision of my life, and now she thought I had stolen her inheritance. In the evening, I got a call from an unknown number. I didn't answer. A minute later, I got a message. "This is Lenny Gross. I need to talk to you." I deleted the message. The next day, he called again. Then again, finally, I answered. "What do you want?" "Mrs. Creswell, I work for your daughter. She wants to know the truth about you." "The truth is in the court records." He laughed. "You know what I mean. Your past, the cases you handled, the people who suffered because of your decisions. That was a long time ago. But they remember." Oh, I hung up. My hands were shaking. Oh, he knew. He knew about the cases I was trying to forget, about the people I destroyed in court for my client's money. That evening, Nina didn't come out for dinner. I knocked on her door, but she didn't answer. I opened the door and saw her on the bed, her face buried in the pillow. "Nina, we need to talk." She didn't move. "I know Caitlin is calling you. I know what she's saying, but that's not the whole truth." "Then tell me the whole truth," she said, sitting up and looking at me with eyes red from crying. "Tell me why you quit your job, why Dad left her nothing. Tell me everything." I sat down on the edge of the bed. When I was a lawyer, I did things I'm not proud of. I defended people who didn't deserve to be defended. I won cases I should have lost. I was good at my job. Too good. And then I realized I was losing Caitlin, that my job had become more important than my family, and then I got scared and I left. Nina looked at me for a long time. "Does Caitlin know about this?" "No." "Why didn't you tell her?" "Because I was afraid she wouldn't understand." "She didn't understand anyway," Nina said quietly. I knew she was right, but it was too late to change anything. The next morning, I found an envelope with no return address in my mailbox. Inside was a single photograph, an old newspaper clipping. The headline read, "Attorney Ashley Creswell wins case against family of deceased employee." Below the headline was a photo of me from 25 years ago. I was standing outside the courthouse wearing a business suit with a cold smile on my face. On the back of the photo was written by hand, "Caitlin will find out everything." Lenny Gross called 3 days after the envelope arrived. I didn't want to answer. He called again, then sent a message. "Your sister wants to talk to you. Vivian." The last time we saw each other was 7 years ago at our mother's funeral. Then the conversation ended with shouting in the hospital corridor. She accused me of indifference, of letting our mother die alone. After that, silence. 7 years of silence. And now she suddenly reappeared. The next morning, Nina showed me a post on social media. Caitlin posted a photo of herself sitting in a cafe with a woman in her 50s, with short gray hair and sharp features. The caption under the photo read, "Finally met my Aunt Vivian. Learned a lot of interesting things about my mother." "Is that your sister?" Nina asked. A nod instead of an answer. "Why have you never told me about her?" "Because we have nothing to talk about." "But she's your sister." "Not all relatives are family, Nina." The girl looked at her with a puzzled expression, but she didn't want to explain. To tell her how Vivian was always jealous, how she blamed me for all her failures, how she failed the bar exam twice and then said that my parents had spent all their money on my education, so she didn't have enough. That wasn't true. Our parents paid the same for both of us. The difference was simple. One studied, the other skipped lectures to go to parties, and then came the accusations. That evening, an unknown number called. My hand reached for the phone on its own. "Ashley," a low, slightly hoarse voice said, a voice she hadn't heard in 7 years. "Vivian." "How are you, sis?" "What do you want?" Laughter in response. "Straight to the point, as always. Nothing has changed." "No time for games." "I know." You never had time for anything but work. And then suddenly you became a housewife. You threw everything away for diapers. The phone almost cracked in her clenched hand. If you called to insult me, you can stop now. I called to warn you. Caitlin is looking for information, and I'm helping her. Why? Because you deserve it. You always thought you were better than everyone else, that you were the only one who could succeed, and me, I'm worthless, right? That was never the case. You're lying. You always looked down on me. You didn't even visit Mom before she died because you were too busy with your wonderful career. That was below the belt. Mom died of a stroke 7 years ago. She lived in a nursing home in a neighboring state. Vivian insisted on it without asking anyone. When the call came from the hospital, it was a 6-hour drive away. Mom was already unconscious. She died the next day without regaining consciousness. Vivian then yelled in the hallway that it was because of her older sister's indifference. You know that's not true. I know. Which one of us took care of Mom these last few years? Who took her to the doctors? You decided to send her to that home without discussion because your help is money, always money. You thought you could buy your way out. Vivian, I'll testify in court. I'll tell them what you were like. Cold, calculating, how you abandoned Mom for your career. Caitlin needs to know the truth. That's not true. That's your version. Then prove me wrong. The phone went dead. Her hands were shaking, but not from fear, from anger. Real hot anger that she hadn't felt in years. Not since the last court case was closed and her law degree was tucked away in a desk drawer. Nina walked into the kitchen and froze. Mom, are you okay? Yes. Who was that on the phone? Aunt Vivian. What did she want? There was no answer. She didn't want to drag Nina into this fight, but the girl was already in it. Everyone was in it. 2 days later, Nina came home early. Roses were being pruned in the garden when she heard a scream from the house. Mom, quick! She was standing in the living room, holding the phone, her face red. I just heard Travis. He was talking to someone near our house. I was walking by and overheard him. What did he say? He was talking about debts, about some guy named Wade. He said this was the last chance, that the old lady had to pay. She held out the phone. Did you record it? The girl nodded. I turned on the recorder when I heard his voice. She pressed play. Travis's voice was clear, though slightly muffled by street noise. Listen, Wade, the debt has already exceeded $230,000. I'm working on it. The old woman has a lot of money. It's just a matter of time. No, she doesn't want to give it up voluntarily. That's why we're in court. As soon as we win, you'll get everything. I promise, another month, 2 at most. The recording ended. Nina stared with wide eyes. He was using Caitlin. He pushed her to file a lawsuit not because of the insult, but because of the debt. Everything was falling into place. Travis had always been a gambler. Marcus remembered that, but it seemed like just small bets on football games. $230,000 was no small change. It was dangerous money, dangerous people. What are you going to do? Nina asked. There was no answer, but a clear understanding came to him. He needed to find out more about Wade Carmichael, how deep Travis had gotten himself into this mess, and most importantly, did Caitlin know about her husband's debts? That night, when Nina went to bed, the laptop opened by itself. Wade Carmichael turned out to be an underground bookmaker with ties to organized crime. Several articles in local newspapers mentioned his name in the context of illegal betting on sporting events. But nothing serious, no arrests, no charges, cautious, dangerous. The screen went dark. Sitting in the dark and thinking, if I tell Caitlin about Travis's debts, she won't believe me. She'll think it's just another manipulation. But if I keep quiet, she'll continue this doomed endeavor and ruin her life for her husband's debts. The next morning, there was a knock on the door at 9. Caitlin stood on the porch, her face stony. We need to talk. She entered without invitation and walked into the living room. About what? The question sounded calmer than she felt inside. About Aunt Vivian. She said things you never said. Like what? That you abandoned Grandma before she died. That you always put your career before your family. That you're a manipulator who knows how to get what she wants. And you believe her over me. She's my aunt. She has no reason to lie. Oh, she does. More than you think. Caitlin crossed her arms over her chest. Then explain. A deep breath. Vivian has been jealous since the day our entrance exam results came back different. She blames me for all her failures, and now she's using you to get revenge. You always do that. You blame others, but you never admit your own mistakes. Caitlin, Vivian has agreed to testify in court. She'll talk about your immoral character, about how you manipulated people for money. She doesn't know anything about my life. She knows more than I do, because you never told me anything. Caitlin turned toward the door, but Nina came down the stairs. She was holding a piece of paper. Caitlin, wait. Her older sister turned around. What? Nina held out the paper. It's a letter from Dad. I found it in your things when I came to pick up the books last week. I'm sorry I took it without permission, but it seemed important. Caitlin took the paper. She unfolded it. She began to read. Her face changed from anger to surprise, then to pain. Marcus had shown this letter a year before his death. He had written it to Caitlin but never sent it. He said he was waiting for the right moment. In it, he wrote about giving up his career for his daughter, about how he could have become the best corporate lawyer in the country, but chose motherhood instead, about how he wanted her to understand this when she grew up. Caitlin read to the end. She looked up. Her eyes were filled with tears. Why didn't you tell me? Because I was afraid you wouldn't understand. She fell silent, clutching the letter. Then she turned abruptly and left, slamming the door behind her. Nina came closer. She kept the letter in her desk drawer. She didn't want to look for it, but when she came to pick up her books, she saw it by accident. Something bitter and angry bubbled up inside her. Caitlin knew. She had known about the letter all along, but had never shown it. She had seen her father's words, but had decided to ignore them. She decided to believe Vivian, Travis, anyone but her mother. The tears wouldn't come. She didn't want to cry anymore. She wanted to fight, to get back the part of herself that had been buried 25 years ago, the Ashley Creswell, who never lost. That evening, she called an old colleague, Liam Page. He was still practicing in New York and had connections everywhere. Ashley? Surprise in his voice. How long has it been? 25 years. I heard you left the practice. I did, but now I need help. What happened? It took 10 minutes to tell him about the lawsuit, about Vivian, about Travis and his debts. I need information about Wade Carmichael. Everything you can find. Liam was silent for a few seconds. Ashley, these are dangerous people. I know. Are you sure you want to get involved in this? I don't want to, but I have to. A sigh on the other end of the line. Okay, give me a week. The phone fell onto the table. It was getting dark outside. Nina was sitting in her room doing her homework. Everything looked normal, peaceful. But inside, a storm was brewing. Caitlin wanted war. She would get it. The third meeting was scheduled for Wednesday at 10 in the morning. Nina asked to come with me. She wanted to be there, wanted to support me. I didn't refuse. Maybe she really needed to see it all with her own eyes. We arrived 15 minutes before the start. The courtroom looked the same as before. Old wood, high ceilings, the smell of paper dust. Caitlin was already sitting at her table with Holloway and Travis. She didn't look our way when we entered. Travis glanced over quickly, then turned away. Holloway was flipping through papers, looking tense. There was another woman sitting at their table. Vivian. She looked straight at me, a cold smile on her face. Her hair was short, gray, neatly combed back. She wore a dark blue business suit. She looked confident, proud, ready for battle. Nina squeezed my hand. Mom, is that her? Yes. She doesn't look like you. We've never looked alike. Judge Mackenzie entered, and everyone stood up. He sat down, looked at the papers, then at the courtroom. Case number 4872. We will continue the hearing. Mr. Holloway, do you have a witness? Holloway stood up. Yes, Your Honor. The defense calls Vivian Creswell. Vivian walked to the witness stand. Her step was confident. Her hands did not tremble as she placed her hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. Holloway moved closer, papers in hand. Ms. Creswell, you are the sister of the defendant, Ashley Creswell, correct? Yes. How long has it been since you last communicated? 7 years. Since the day our mother died. Can you tell the court about your relationship with your sister? Vivian turned to me and looked me straight in the eye. Ashley has always been ambitious. Her career meant more to her than anything else. When our mother fell ill, Ashley was busy with her own affairs. She sent money, but she never came to visit. Even when Mom was admitted to a nursing home, Ashley didn't find the time to visit her. How did your mother die? Mom died of a stroke. Ashley arrived at the hospital 6 hours after the call. Mom was already unconscious. She never heard her daughter's goodbye. Holloway nodded. Do you think your sister is capable of manipulation? Objection, Your Honor. I stood up. That's an assumption, not a fact. Judge Mackenzie looked at Holloway. Rephrase the question. Holloway cleared his throat. Have you seen examples of your sister manipulating people? Vivian smiled. Yes. When we were younger, she always knew how to get what she wanted. Our parents gave her more attention, more money for education. She convinced them that I wasn't cut out for a career in law. And when I failed my exams, she didn't support me. Instead, she said it was my own fault. It was strange to hear. Not offensive, just strange. Vivian was creating a story that never existed. Our parents paid for both of us equally. No one was persuading anyone. She failed her exams because she didn't study, but now she was telling it so convincingly that even Caitlin nodded as she listened. Thank you. No further questions. Holloway sat down. Judge Mackenzie looked at me. Mrs. Creswell, do you wish to question the witness? I stood up. I walked to the stand. Vivian looked at me defiantly. Mrs. Creswell, you claim that my parents spent more money on my education. Can you provide documentation to support that? She blinked. What? Do you have bank statements, receipts, any documents proving that my parents paid me more than you? No, but then it's just your assumption, not a fact. She pressed her lips together. You also claim that I didn't visit my mother in the nursing home. Iki, do you know that Mom ended up there because of your decision? Without discussing it with me? She needed care. Yes, but you didn't ask me if I could help. You just made the decision on your own, sent her to that home, and then accused me of indifference. Vivian was silent. One more question. You said I arrived at the hospital 6 hours after the call. Do you know that I lived 6 hours away from that nursing home? I know. Then how could I have gotten there any faster? She didn't answer. You also claim that I convinced my parents that you weren't cut out for a legal career. Can you name even one specific conversation where I said that? Vivian opened her mouth, then closed it. It was a long time ago. So you can't name a single specific conversation, not a single specific moment, just your subjective feeling that it happened. I know what happened. You know how you felt. That's not the same as facts. She turned to the judge. Your Honor, the witness is not providing facts, only personal assumptions based on old resentments. I ask the court to disregard her testimony as unfounded and emotionally charged. Judge Mackenzie nodded. The witness may leave. Vivian stood up and walked back to her seat. Her face was red, her hands clenched into fists. Caitlin looked at her, then at me. Her face showed confusion. Holloway stood up again. Your Honor, the defense would like to call one more witness. Mr. Holloway? The judge interrupted. How many more witnesses do you have? "Oh, well, technically." Answer clearly. "No more, Your Honor." "Then let's move on to closing arguments. Mrs. Creswell, do you have anything to add?" I stood up again. I could feel my heart pounding, but my hands weren't shaking. My voice was calm and firm. It was a familiar feeling, standing in court in control of the situation, knowing that every word carried weight. "Your Honor, this case was doomed to failure from the outset. The plaintiffs have no evidence that the will was made under duress or manipulation. According to Article 37, Paragraph 2 of the Inheritance Law, a will is considered valid if the testator was of sound mind at the time of its execution. The medical records provided to the court confirms the full legal capacity of the late Marcus Daughtry. According to Article 41, Paragraph 1 of the same Act, witnesses confirm the absence of coercion. All the plaintiffs can offer are personal insults and assumptions that have no legal force." Holloway tried to stand up, but the judge stopped him with a gesture. "But," she continued, turning to Caitlin, "if my daughter wants to speak the language of emotion rather than jurisprudence in court, then let me show her what her truth about me is really worth." She took a letter out of her folder, the same one Nina had found in Caitlin's belongings. "Your Honor, I request that this letter be read aloud. This is a letter from the late Marcus Daughtry to his daughter, Caitlin, written a year before his death. If the daughter wants emotion in court, here it is, the emotional truth." Judge Mackenzie took the letter, looked at it, then began to read. "My dear Caitlin, I am writing this letter because I want you to understand something important. Your mother gave up everything for you. When you were born, she was one of the best corporate lawyers in New York. She had won 78 out of 90 cases. Her name was printed in all the legal publications. Her partners predicted she would become a partner in the firm. She could have been the best in the country, earning millions. But she chose to be a mom. She chose to be with you. When you were 5, she came home and said she was quitting her job. I asked why. She showed me your drawing, our family, but she wasn't in it. She said, 'I don't want to be a ghost in my daughter's life. I want to be a real mother.' The next day, she wrote her resignation letter. 'I want you to understand this when you grow up. She loved you more than her career, more than her ambitions, more than success. And I want you to appreciate that. With love, your father.' Silence fell over the room. Even Holloway stopped rustling his papers. Caitlin sat motionless, her face white as chalk. Travis nervously twirled a pen in his hands. Vivian stared at the floor. 'I gave up my career and my future,' she said quietly but clearly so that every word would reach Caitlin, 'because I loved my daughter. I gave up what I had studied for 6 years, what I had stayed up nights preparing for court, what gave me my name, my status, my money, and now this is the price I pay for everything I did for her, a lawsuit from my own daughter.' Caitlin stood up suddenly, the chair clattering behind her. 'Why didn't you ever tell me?' Her voice trembled. 'Why did I have to find out from a letter from my father?' 'Because I was afraid you wouldn't understand, that you would take it as a reproach, that you would say no one asked you to sacrifice your career. You were always afraid. You always hid behind silence.' 'I disagree,' Holloway interjected, standing up. 'Your Honor, this is no place for family quarrels.' Judge Mackenzie looked at him coldly. 'Mr. Holloway, you are the one who brought this case to court. You turned it into a public battle. You called a witness who spoke about emotions instead of facts. Now listen to the consequences. Continue, Mrs. Creswell.' She turned to Caitlin. 'You're right. I was afraid that you would find out who your mother was before you were born. I was afraid you would find out about the cases where I defended large corporations against ordinary people, about widows who lost their husbands and lost their court cases because of me, about families who lost everything because the companies I defended won their cases. I was afraid you would see me as a monster." She took other documents out of the folder. "But if you want to know the truth, here it is. The whole truth. Your husband owes $230,000 to an underground bookmaker named Wade Carmichael." Travis turned pale. Caitlin turned sharply to him. "What?" She placed the documents on the table like a judge. "Here's the proof. Here's his correspondence with Wade Carmichael. Here are the phone calls where he promises to pay off the debt as soon as he receives the money from the will. Here are the bank statements showing the sequence of loans at ever higher interest rates. Here is a recording of a conversation Nina overheard 3 days ago where he says, 'The old woman has to pay.'" Judge Mackenzie took the documents and began to review them. His eyebrows knitted together. "Mr. Daughtry, can you comment on these allegations?" Travis was silent. His face was red. His hands were shaking. Then he suddenly stood up. It's not what you think." "Then what is it?" Caitlin's voice was quiet, but there was steel in it. "I had some financial problems, but $230,000 is not some problems. It's a disaster. I wanted to fix everything. By pushing me to file a lawsuit against my mother, by taking advantage of my hurt feelings." He remained silent. Caitlin looked at him, and there was something terrible in her eyes. Understanding that she had been used, that all this time she'd been nothing more than a tool to pay off someone else's debts. "Your Honor, I request that this audio recording be added to the case file," she said, approaching the table. "This is a conversation between Mr. Daughtry and Wade Carmichael, recorded by my younger daughter 3 days ago." The judge nodded. The recording was played. Travis's voice rang out clearly in the courtroom without interference. "Listen, Wade, the debt has already exceeded $230,000. I'm working on it. The old lady has a lot of money. It's just a matter of time. No, she doesn't want to give it up voluntarily. That's why we're in court. Holloway says there's a chance. As soon as we win, you'll get everything, every cent. I promise. Another month, 2 at most, and you'll have your money." The recording ended. The silence in the room was deafening. Yet Caitlin stood there, trembling all over, her hands clenched and unclenched. Then she turned abruptly and almost ran out of the room. She turned back to the judge, her voice calm and professional again. "A daughter traded her own mother for a gambling husband. It seems that's why her father didn't give her a penny. He knew Travis better than she did. He knew that the money would not benefit her. He knew it would go to pay off debts, to new bets, to the endless pit of gambling. Now I understand why my husband made his will the way he did. He wanted to protect her, even from herself, even if it meant she would hate both him and me. On that note, I propose we end this farce and circus that the courtroom has become." Judge Mackenzie put down his papers. His face showed signs of fatigue. "I'm calling a 15-minute recess. I will deliver my decision after the recess." Everyone stood up. Nina ran up to me and hugged me. "Mom, you were incredible, like in the movies about lawyers." "Where's Caitlin?" "She went out into the hallway." We went into the hallway. Caitlin was sitting on the floor by the window, her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with sobs. Nina ran to her first, crouched down next to her and hugged her shoulders. "Caitlin, everything will be fine. You haven't lost everything yet." Caitlin didn't answer. She just cried, loudly, almost childishly. Nina stroked her back, whispered something soothing, and held her close. I came closer. I stood there for a few seconds, looking at them. 2 daughters. One was still almost a child, 16 years old, but already so grown up in her compassion. The other was a 30-year-old woman, but now she looked like a broken girl. I sat down next to her on the floor, the cold tile under my knees, the smell of old wax from the floor. Caitlin didn't lift her head. "Caitlin," I said quietly. She lifted her face. Her eyes were red and swollen, mascara smeared across her cheeks. She looked younger than usual, more vulnerable. "Right now, you see what I gave up for you, for my daughter. That career, that success, that money. It could have been mine, it could have been with you your whole life, but I chose you. I know you're hurting. I know you feel betrayed by Travis and Dad and me. Even though you're a grown woman now, I still remember you as my little girl. I remember holding you in my arms for the first time. How you took your first steps. How you drew that picture where I wasn't in it. And I realized I was losing you. Caitlin listened, never taking her eyes off me. Despite all that, I still love you. I loved you then, and I love you now. But I can't make your choices for you. I can't make you understand why I made those choices. I can't make you forgive me for never telling you the truth. So you'll have to decide for yourself what kind of mother you want. A heartless lawyer who ruined people's lives in court for the sake of her career and money, or a mother who gave up all that for you. Both of these women are me, and it's up to you to decide which one you're willing to accept. Caitlin covered her face with her hands again. She cried even harder. Nina hugged her, held her close, and stroked her hair. Everything will be okay, Caitlin. I promise everything will be okay. The bailiff walked down the hallway. The hearing will resume in 2 minutes. Nina helped Caitlin to her feet. She wiped her face with her sleeve and tried to compose herself. The three of us returned to the courtroom together, although we sat at different tables. Judge Mackenzie entered, and everyone stood. He sat down and looked around the room. His face was stern, but there was something like sympathy in his eyes. Please be seated. Having heard all the testimony and evidence, the court renders the following decision. The lawsuit filed by Caitlin Daughtry against Ashley Creswell to invalidate the will is dismissed in its entirety. The will of Marcus Daughtry, dated February 15, 2024, remains in full force and effect. The costs of the case, including court fees and expert witness fees, shall be borne by the plaintiff. The case is closed. He banged the gavel once, a clear, final sound. It was over. Holloway hastily gathered his papers, trying not to look anyone in the eye. Travis sat motionless, his head bowed. Caitlin slowly got up and walked to the exit. She didn't look back, didn't look at Travis or me. Nina took my hand. You won, Mom. Yes, I won. The victory felt hollow. The will remained valid. The case was closed, and I kept the money and the house. But what had really changed? Caitlin still felt betrayed. Travis still had debts and now a lost case. And there was now a rift between mother and daughter, perhaps even deeper than before. I didn't want to torment my daughter in court. I didn't want to expose her husband as a debtor and a manipulator. But she left me no choice. She came to court, she brought witnesses, she wanted a fight. Yeah, and she got it. Now all that remained was to hope that it would be enough. That Caitlin would understand, finally understand what I was trying to tell her. That the sacrifice made 25 years ago was real. That my love for her was and remains real. Even after this trial, even after these words, even after everything, and that no one wants any more trials. Nina pulled me by the hand. Mom, let's go home. Yes, home. To an empty house where Marcus was no longer there, where Caitlin would no longer come for dinner, where only the two of us remained, me and Nina. But at least Nina was still there. At least one daughter who still believed. Caitlin filed for divorce a week after the trial. Nina told me about it. She found the information on social media, where Caitlin posted a short message, starting a new life, alone. There were many comments under the post, most of them supportive, but some asked what had happened. Caitlin didn't respond to anyone. Travis disappeared from her profile completely. All their photos together were deleted. It was as if he had never existed. The divorce process took a month. No shared assets, no children, nothing to keep them together. Just signatures on a piece of paper, and that was it. Nina said Caitlin looked relieved. Exhausted, but relieved. She found out about Vivian by accident. She ran into an old acquaintance, Janice Morgan, at the supermarket. She used to work at the same law firm as me many years ago. We were standing at the checkout and she suddenly asked, "Ashley, have you heard about Vivian?" "No. What about her?" "She moved to California. Looks like she found a job there. Some startup hired her as a legal consultant." It was strange. Vivian never finished law school, never passed her exams. How could she work as a consultant? "Are you sure?" Janice shrugged. "That's what she wrote in her profile. Maybe she's exaggerating. You know how she likes to embellish?" Yes, I knew. Nina returned to school, but she had changed. She became more serious. She smiled less. The English teacher called me a week after the trial and said that Nina had submitted an essay on the hardest day of my life. In the essay, she described the court hearing. She described how her sister cried in the hallway, how her mother stood in court and defended herself against her own daughter. "It's a very mature essay," said the teacher, "but I'm worried about Nina. She looks tired." "I know. Thank you for letting me know." That evening, we sat together in the kitchen. Nina was doing her math homework, chewing on her pencil, frowning over the equations. "Nina, are you okay?" She looked up. "Yes, why do you ask?" "Your teacher called. She said you turned in an essay about the trial." Nina put down her pencil. "I'm sorry, I didn't want you to worry." "I just want to know how you're feeling." She was silent for a few seconds, staring at the table. "I saw Caitlin crying, the way she looked at you as if you were a stranger, and I thought that could happen to me too, that someday I might look at you as if I didn't know you." My heart sank. "Nina, I don't want that, Mom. I don't ever want to look at you the way Caitlin looked at you." I stood up and hugged her. She snuggled up like a little girl. Even though she was 16, she still needed those hugs sometimes. "You won't be like Caitlin. You're different." "How do you know?" "Because you ask. You talk to me." Caitlin never asked. Nina pulled away and looked at me. "What if I stop asking too?" "Then I'll come and remind you that you can." She smiled, her first real smile in weeks. Caitlin hadn't called. She hadn't written. 3 months of silence. Sometimes I saw her profile on social media through Nina's account. Caitlin posted photos. The apartment she was renting, coffee in a cafe, the book she was reading. Not a word about me. Not a word about the trial. Nina sometimes mentioned her. Do you think she's angry? I don't know. Do you think she'll ever forgive me? I don't know, Nina, but deep down I hoped she would. I hoped that one day Caitlin would understand, that she would look at the drawing she made when she was 5 and understand why I had to leave my job, for whom I gave up everything. One day, 3 months after the trial, Nina came home with news. Caitlin wrote to me. She asked to meet. My heart was racing. When? Tomorrow. She wants to talk. About what? Nina shrugged. She didn't say. She just asked to meet. The next day, Nina went to the meeting. She was nervous, twirling her phone in her hands before leaving. If she starts talking badly about you, I'll defend you, she said. Don't. If she wants to talk, let her talk. But, Nina, she needs to express herself. Let her. She left. She sat at home for 2 hours, trying to read a book, but the words blurred. Her thoughts kept returning to Caitlin, to when she cried in the courtroom hallway, to when she looked at me as the judge read Marcus's letter. Nina came back in the evening. Her face was thoughtful, but not sad. How did it go? She sat down on the sofa. She talked a lot. About Travis, about the trial, about Dad, about you two. What did she say? She said she was afraid of you in court, that you were so cold, so professional, that she had never seen you like that before, and it scared her. It was understandable. In court, I had to become the Ashley I was 25 years ago. Tough, calculating, ruthless. I had to use all the skills I had buried deep inside. She said she wants to talk to you, not now, but soon, when she's ready. Okay, Mom, are you mad at her? No, I'm not angry. What do you feel? I had to think about it. What did I feel? Pain? Disappointment? Relief? Hope. I finally said. Hope that she'll understand. Nina nodded. She will understand. I'll give her time. Time. That's all I could give her right now. 2 more months of silence. Then one morning there was a knock at the door. She opened it. Caitlin was standing on the porch. She looked different. Her hair was shorter. She was wearing jeans instead of business pants, a simple t-shirt instead of a blouse. She looked younger, more tired, but calmer. Hi, she said. Hi, can I come in? Sure. She came in. She looked around the living room as if she were seeing it for the first time, even though she had grown up in this house and lived here until she was 22. Is Nina home? At school. Caitlin nodded. Maybe. We can talk? Yes. Let's go out on the terrace. They went out onto the terrace. The sun was shining, the birds were singing. The garden looked beautiful. The roses were in bloom. The grass was fresh and green. Marcus had always loved this garden. He could sit here for hours just looking at the flowers. They sat down at the table. I wanted to make coffee, but Caitlin stopped me. No, thank you. Let's just sit here. We sat in silence. Caitlin looked at the garden. Her fingers tapped nervously on the table. I got a job, she said finally. I'm an accountant at a small firm. The salary is modest, but it's enough. That's good. I'm renting an apartment. It's 1 room, but it's enough for me. I'm glad. Caitlin looked at me. I broke up with Travis, officially. I got the papers a month ago. Nina told me. He tried to call me a few times. I didn't answer. I don't want to hear from him. A nod instead of an answer. She turned back to the garden. I've been thinking a lot about the trial, about what you said, about that letter from Dad. And? I was afraid of you then, seeing you like that. You stood there, so confident, so cold. You destroyed Vivian's testimony in minutes. You presented evidence against Travis, and I didn't even know you knew about it. You were in control, and I realized I never really knew you. I didn't know who you were before I was born. I didn't want you to know. Why? Because I was afraid you would see me as a monster, that you would find out about the things I did and hate me. Caitlin was silent for a few seconds. I don't hate you. I never did. Not even during the trial. I just wanted Dad to see me. I wanted him to value me as much as he valued you. My heart ached. He valued you, Caitlin. He loved you. He just wanted you to learn something important. What? That money isn't the most important thing. That love and respect can't be bought. That you have to work to earn what you have. Caitlin lowered her head. I never really worked. I always relied on Dad, then on Travis. There was always someone to pay the bills, solve the problems, and now I'm alone. And for the first time in my life, I have to do everything myself. How does it feel? She looked at me. Scary, but right. For the first time, I feel like I deserve what I have. Because I earned it myself. A smile touched her lips. Your dad would be proud. Caitlin didn't answer, but something warm appeared in her eyes. We sat in silence for a few minutes. Then Caitlin spoke again. About the inheritance. Don't. No, wait. I have to say it. I don't want it anymore. I really don't. Dad was right. I don't deserve it. I don't deserve anything he left behind. Caitlin, I want to earn my own living, without Dad's money, without your money, just my own. I looked at her for a long time. She had changed. She really had changed. There was something new in her eyes. Determination, perhaps. Or just maturity. All right, I said quietly. But if you ever need help, I know, thank you. She stood up as if she was about to leave, but then she hesitated. Can I ask you a question? Of course. Why didn't you cry during the trial, even when Vivian said those things? Even when I yelled at you, you didn't cry. It made me wonder. Because if I cried, I would have lost. You can't show weakness in court. You have to be strong, even if you're falling apart inside. And now? Can you cry now? Cry. I, I don't want to be like that anymore, she said honestly. I don't want to be that cold lawyer I was in court. Court is intoxicating. Winning cases is even more intoxicating. But winning against you, against my daughter, didn't bring any of that. Not to you, not to me. Only pain. So, yes, I can cry. Caitlin looked at me for a long time. Then she nodded. I don't want to be who I was either. The one who depended on others. The one who blamed everyone but herself. She sat down again. We sat in silence. We didn't talk. We just sat. Then we heard footsteps. Nina came out onto the terrace. In her hands was a tray with 3 cups of tea. Hi, she said, looking at Caitlin. I didn't know you were here. I made some tea. Caitlin smiled. Thank you. Nina put the cups on the table and sat down between us. She took both of our hands. This is better, she said. Much better. The 3 of us sat on the terrace, holding hands, looking at the garden that Marcus loved so much, the garden he had tended for years, the roses he had planted, the grass he mowed every weekend. He would have wanted to see us here, together. I don't know if we'll ever be a family again, a real family without resentment, without the pain of the past. Maybe not. Maybe the rift between me and Caitlin will never completely heal. The scars will remain. The memories of the trial will remain. The words spoken in anger will not be forgotten. But we are taking a step, one small, uncertain step toward each other. This is the beginning, not the end, not a happy ending, not a fairy tale. Just the beginning of something new. Something that will have to be built day by day, conversation by conversation. Life offers no guarantees. It doesn't promise that everything will be fine. It doesn't promise that old wounds will heal without a trace. But it does offer chances. Chances to start over. Chances to do things differently. Chances to try. And we're taking our chance. All 3 of us. The sun was shining on the garden, the birds were singing, and for the first time in many months, there was a sense of peace, not perfect peace, not complete peace, but enough to breathe easier. Nina squeezed my hand. Mom, she said quietly, everything will be fine, I promise. Maybe she was right. Maybe everything would be okay, not right away, not tomorrow, but someday. For now, we just sat together, drinking tea on the patio, looking out at the garden Marcus loved. And that was enough. Caitlin looked at me over the rim of her cup. Mom, she said. It was the first time she had called me that in months. Not Yous, not Ashley. Mom, can I come over sometimes? Not often, just sometimes? My heart skipped a beat. Of course. You can always come over. She nodded. Her smile was uncertain, but sincere. Thank you. And there was something more in that thank you than just gratitude for being allowed to visit. Nina stood up. I'll go make something for dinner. Caitlin, will you stay? Caitlin hesitated, then nodded. Yes, if I can. Of course you can, Nina said, and went into the house. The 2 of them were left alone, mother and daughter, 2 women who had gone through court, through pain, through betrayal, 2 women who were trying to find their way back to each other. Caitlin looked at the garden. Dad loved this garden. Yes, he did. I remember him planting roses. I helped him. I was 8, I think. 9. You were 9. She smiled. He said roses were like people. They need time to bloom and care, lots of care. He was wise. Yes, he was. We sat in silence, and there was something soothing about it, something healing. Marcus would be smiling now, looking down on us. He would know that his plan had worked, that the will he had written was not a punishment. It was a lesson. And Caitlin was finally beginning to learn it.